The sun hung low behind the dense canopy of the frontier forest, casting long golden rays that filtered through the leaves like fragile fingers of light. Deputy Marshal Elijah Cole guided his horse slowly along the narrow path, every sense sharpened. He wasn't on routine patrol, he was tracking something. Or rather, someone. 2 days earlier, a report had reached town. Another woman missing. The fifth this season. Locals whispered of a phantom preacher, a man who lured young women into the wilderness and vanished with them. Elijah didn't believe in phantoms, but he knew monsters often wore human faces. A soft noise broke the stillness, a faint whimper carried by the breeze. Elijah pulled the reins and dismounted quietly, his hand resting on the worn grip of his revolver. His eyes scanned the woods, alert, focused. Then he saw her dot at the base of a massive fallen tree lay a woman young, maybe 20 at most, half hidden by brush and shadows. Her long blonde hair was matted and tangled, falling like a curtain across her dirt-smeared face. The once green dress she wore was torn, filthy, and clung to her like a second skin. She leaned back on one arm, her other hand shaking as she tried to push herself away from him, eyes wide with terror. "It's all right, ma'am," Elijah said softly, lowering himself to one knee and raising both hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe now." The woman's breath came in sharp gasps. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to determine whether he was real or another nightmare. "No one's going to hurt you," Elijah continued, his voice steady but gentle. "My name's Elijah Cole. I'm a deputy marshal. Can you tell me your name?" Her lips trembled, but no sound came. She shook her head slightly, clutching the torn fabric at her chest like armor. Elijah glanced around, every muscle tense. The silence of the woods pressed in on them, too heavy, too still. He crouched closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Did someone do this to you? Is he nearby?" Her eyes darted toward the dark trees behind him. A barely audible whisper escaped her lips. "He's still out there." Elijah's stomach tightened. Whoever had done this wasn't far. "We need to move," he said, carefully offering his hand. "I'll get you out of here. But we can't stay here." For a moment, she hesitated, her eyes flicking between him and the forest's edge. Then, as though her final thread of strength snapped, she grasped his hand with a desperate grip. He helped her to her feet, steadying her as her knees buckled. She was lighter than he expected, far too thin, like she hadn't eaten properly. 4 weeks. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale beneath layers of grime. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed from somewhere deep in the trees, a branch snapping underfoot. Elijah's head jerked toward the sound, his revolver drawn in an instant. His eyes searched the shifting shadows, but saw nothing. "Stay behind me," he ordered, placing himself between her and the direction of the noise. The woman clung to the back of his coat, trembling. Every instinct screamed at him, "You're being watched." The forest remained deathly quiet for a long moment. Then, with deliberate care, Elijah holstered his revolver and turned back to her. "We can't wait any longer. We'll head for the old trapper's cabin about 2 miles east. You'll be safe there," she nodded weakly. As they began to move, Elijah kept a sharp eye on the shadows. Whoever had done this was close. And he wasn't about to let this man take her again. As they disappeared into the dense woods, the forest seemed to breathe once more, branches swaying gently under the wind. But behind one thick trunk, hidden in the dim light, a pair of cold eyes watched them slip away. The hunt was far from over. The woman stumbled as they trekked through the uneven terrain, but Elijah caught her arm gently before she could fall again. The old trapper's cabin was still another mile away, and nightfall was closing in fast. The shadows thickened, wrapping the forest in a cold, unsettling stillness. "Almost there," Elijah whispered, offering a small, reassuring nod. "Just keep moving." She tried to speak, but her throat was dry and hoarse. After a few attempts, her voice finally broke through the quiet. "Clara," she rasped. "My name, it's Clara." Elijah glanced back at her, nodding with quiet relief. A name was the first crack in her wall of fear. It was a start. "You're safe now, Clara," he promised. "We'll get you some water and rest soon." The trapper's cabin sat deep in a hollow, mostly forgotten by the townsfolk. Its isolation, which once made it dangerous, now made it their sanctuary. Elijah pushed open the creaking door, quickly scanning the room before guiding Clara inside. Small space smelled of damp wood and old smoke. A crude cot sat in the corner, while hunting tools and rusted pans hung on the walls. Elijah moved quickly, lighting the oil lamp on the table, casting a soft glow across Clara's pale face. He fetched a tin cup of water from the rain barrel outside. Clara drank greedily, her hands trembling. When she finally looked up, her wide eyes met his. "He calls himself the shepherd," she whispered. Elijah froze. "I heard rumors," he said softly. "But I never thought I'd meet one of his victims." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. "He pretended to be a man of God, said he was helping women like me, lost girls with nowhere to go. But it was a lie. He took us far into the woods, locked us away. There were others, but I don't know what happened to them." Her voice cracked on the last words, and her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Elijah moved to the cot, kneeling beside her. "You don't have to say any more right now," he said gently. "You've been through enough." Clara gripped the blanket tightly. "He'll come for me. He always does." "Not this time," Elijah assured her. His jaw tightened. "I've been tracking him for weeks. And I swear to you, Clara, I won't let him take you back." Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the trees like a warning. Elijah stood, walking over to secure the door. As he latched the heavy bar across it, a sharp thud echoed from somewhere beyond the cabin. Both of them froze. "It could be the wind," Elijah said quietly, though he didn't believe his own words. Clara's voice trembled. "He follows like a wolf. He knows how to stay hidden." Elijah peered through the cracks between the wooden planks, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the clearing. The trees swayed gently, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. For now there was nothing but. Elijah knew better than to trust the calm. "You should try to rest," he told her. "We leave before dawn. I'll take you to town where you'll be safe, and we'll get the sheriff involved." "He won't hurt anyone else." Clara nodded, but sleep was a distant hope. She curled into a ball on the cot, her eyes never leaving. The door. Elijah pulled a chair close to the entrance, his revolver resting on his lap. The lamplight flickered, casting tall, shifting shadows across the walls. He sat like a sentinel through the long hours, listening to every creak, every snap outside. And though the forest eventually fell silent, Elijah felt the weight of unseen eyes lingering in the darkness. Somewhere out there, the shepherd waited. The first light of dawn filtered through the cabin's dusty window. The pale beams fell across Elijah's tired face as he remained seated by the door, revolver still resting in his lap. His eyes burned from a night without sleep, but he dared not close them, not while danger prowled nearby. Clara stirred beneath a thin blanket, blinking as the faint warmth of morning touched her skin. She sat up slowly, her expression fragile but no longer as vacant as it had been the night before. "You stayed awake all night?" she asked softly. Elijah gave a faint smile. "Didn't seem right to rest while you couldn't." Clara lowered her gaze, clutching the blanket tightly around her. "You don't have to risk yourself for me." "Yes, I do," he said, his voice firm but kind. "And I will." For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, birds began to call, the early morning air deceptively peaceful. But Elijah knew that peace was only skin-deep. Clara finally broke the silence. "I know where his camp is." Elijah looked up sharply. "You're sure?" She nodded. "It's about 5 miles east, near a ravine. There's a cave where he keeps his prisoners. Her voice caught. "I escaped when he was gone hunting, but he always comes back." "Always." Elijah exhaled slowly, thinking. "If we go to town now, it could take days to organize a posse. By then, he might disappear or worse." He saw the resolve hardening behind Clara's frightened eyes. Despite the fear, she was willing to confront the nightmare head on. "I'll take you back there," she whispered. "We can stop him before he finds another girl." Elijah studied her closely. This was no longer just about rescue, it was about justice. And Clara, despite everything, wanted to fight. "All right," he agreed. "But you stay close. We do this together." The sun had climbed higher as they picked their way through dense underbrush. The forest thickened as they moved eastward, the trees rising like towering sentinels above them. Each snapping twig beneath their boots sounded louder than it should have, every bird call suspicious. Elijah led, his revolver drawn, eyes constantly scanning. Clara followed a few paces behind, pointing out familiar landmarks, a twisted cedar, a boulder shaped like a horse's head, an old deer stand. As they walked, Clara began to open up, her voice steadier with each word. "He came to the village claiming to save lost souls, preaching about purity, redemption." She shook her head bitterly. "But he only wanted to own us." Elijah listened closely, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. He'd heard too many stories like this. Men who cloaked evil beneath holy words. "You fought your way out, Clara," he said softly. "That takes more strength than most could ever imagine." She looked up at him with a faint smile. I had to, or I'd be dead. They moved forward, climbing a small ridge, overlooking a narrow ravine. Clara pointed to a cluster of rocks near the base. There, the entrance to the cave. That's where a sharp snap interrupted her. Both froze. From the dense brush behind them, a voice slithered through the trees like poison. Well, my little lamb has wandered back home. Elijah spun around, raising his weapon. From the shadows emerged a tall man in tattered preacher's garb, his eyes cold and empty, lips curling into a cruel smile. The shepherd. His revolver was all ready, aimed at them. You've caused me quite a bit of trouble, Clara, the shepherd sneered. But don't worry, your punishment will be thorough. Elijah steadied his aim, his voice like steel. It's over, shepherd. You won't hurt her or anyone else again. The shepherd laughed softly. You're wrong, Marshal. It's only just begun. In an instant, another shadow moved behind Elijah, a second man, the shepherd's accomplice, raising a rifle. Elijah's heart pounded. They were outnumbered. The trap had been set, the rifle cocked behind him. Elijah's instinct screamed, but there was no room to act without risking Clara. His hand remained steady on his revolver, aimed at the shepherd's chest. Drop it, Marshal, the shepherd said coldly, or my brother'll shoot you where you stand. Elijah's mind raced. The shepherd wasn't alone, he never had been. The accomplice stepped closer behind Elijah, rifle aimed square at his back. Clara stood frozen, her breath quick and shallow, eyes darting between the two men. The shepherd tilted his head, studying Elijah like a cornered animal. You thought you could take me alone? Foolish. Better men than you have fallen, Elijah said through gritted teeth. Your days of hurting women are over, oh Marshal. The shepherd's smile twisted into something uglier. I've only just begun. Suddenly the accomplice struck. The rifle stock smashed into the back of Elijah's head, sending him crashing to the ground. His revolver skidded across the dirt, out of reach. The world spun, but Elijah forced his vision to steady, struggling to stay conscious. Clara gasped. The shepherd turned his attention to her, stepping forward with deliberate, sickening calm. I gave you salvation, he hissed. And this is how you repay me? Running away like a filthy whore? Stay away from her. Elijah roared, but his voice was weak, his vision still swimming. The shepherd grabbed Clara's arm, jerking her forward. She stumbled, barely able to keep her footing. You think this lawman can protect you? No one protects you but me. But something had changed in Clara's eyes. Where there had once been fear, there was now something stronger, something dangerous. You don't own me anymore, she whispered, her voice shaking but firm. You never did. The shepherd's grip tightened. You'll regret defying. In that instant, Clara's free hand shot to her waist, fingers wrapping around the small blade Elijah had given her before they left the cabin, just in case. With one sharp movement, she drove the knife deep into the shepherd's side. He screamed, stumbling backward, his grip loosening as blood soaked through his shirt. His brother, momentarily stunned, swung his rifle toward Clara. But Elijah, summoning every ounce of strength, lunged forward, tackling the man to the ground. The rifle discharged, sending a deafening shot into the trees. Birds scattered in a frenzied storm of wings. Elijah wrestled with the accomplice, fists slamming into flesh and bone. His opponent was younger and stronger, but Elijah fought with something more powerful, rage and duty. Finally, with a burst of force, Elijah slammed the man's head into the rocky ground, knocking him out cold. The shepherd clutched his bleeding side, trying to stand. Clara stood before him, holding the bloodied knife with both hands, trembling. You belong to me, the shepherd rasped. No, Clara said, her voice stronger now. Not anymore. As he reached for her again, Elijah fired. The single gunshot echoed through the ravine. The shepherd staggered, eyes wide with shock, before collapsing to the ground. Motionless, the woods grew silent once more. Only the heavy breathing of Elijah and Clara remained. Elijah slowly stood, holstering his revolver. Clara stared at the shepherd's lifeless body, tears streaking her dirt-stained face, not of fear, but of release. It's over, Elijah said softly. Clara fell to her knees, sobbing not from weakness, but from relief. Elijah knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. You saved yourself, Clara, he whispered. You were stronger than him all along. The morning light pierced through the trees, breaking the long, dark night of terror. For the first time in what felt like forever, Clara could breathe. The sun climbed higher as the forest began to stir with the quiet sounds of life returning. Clara stood silently beside Elijah, her gaze fixed on the still body of the man who had once called himself the shepherd. Her chest rose and fell in slow, measured breaths, no longer shallow and panicked, but deliberate. Elijah bent to retrieve his revolver, then turned his attention to the unconscious accomplice. He knelt beside the young man, checking his pulse. "He's alive," he muttered. "Barely." Clara looked up, wiping her face with a trembling hand. "What will happen to him?" Elijah stood, brushing the dirt from his coat. "He'll face a judge. I'll make sure of it. And when he does, so will every other man who helped hide this evil." For the first time in days, Clara felt something unexpected: safety. It wasn't complete yet, and the road ahead would be long, but the weight she had carried through endless nights in captivity had finally begun to lift. Elijah fashioned a makeshift rope from a saddle strap and tied the accomplice's hands tightly behind his back. He worked in silence, his movements efficient and deliberate. Clara watched him, noticing the way he checked the shadows even now, the way he kept his back to hers, shielding her without thinking. "Why did you come after me?" she asked, breaking the stillness. He paused, glancing up at her with soft eyes. "Because someone had to." "No one else did," she said bitterly. Elijah met her gaze. "They will now. Because you're going to tell your story and I'll make sure the world listens." She nodded slowly, and though fear still lingered like smoke in her bones, something else was beginning to take root. Resolve. They walked through the forest together, Elijah leading his horse, the unconscious man slumped over its back. Clara kept close, her steps steadier than they had been the day before. Each mile brought them closer to the town and further from the nightmare. By the time they reached the outskirts, townsfolk had already gathered. A boy had seen Elijah riding in from a distance and ran ahead shouting, "The marshal's back, he's got one of 'em." Clara shrank slightly under the sudden attention, but Elijah placed a hand gently on her back. "You don't have to speak if you're not ready," he said, "but you're safe, you hear me?" She nodded, eyes wide as the townspeople approached, men, women, and children with faces full of questions, fear, and curiosity. Sheriff Hardwick emerged from the crowd, his mustache twitching in shock as he took in the scene. "You found her," he murmured. "Good Lord. And you brought one of them back." Elijah dismounted and handed the reins to a deputy. "Clara here led me to the shepherd's camp. The man's dead. This one helped him. Get him locked up. And send word to the circuit judge." The sheriff stared at Clara, dumbfounded. You escaped?" Clara stepped forward, her voice clear despite the tremor beneath it. "I survived, and there are others. We have to find them before it's too late." A hushed murmur rippled through the crowd. No one had expected the terrified girl from the woods to speak with such courage. But Clara stood tall, even as tears shimmered in her eyes. Elijah gave her a subtle nod. "We'll find them, together." Weeks passed. With Elijah's help, Clara shared her story with the town and beyond. Search parties combed the forests, uncovering hidden graves and finding one more survivor still barely clinging to life. The truth about the shepherd's cult spread, shaking the region. Clara never returned to who she was before, but something better emerged in her place. A survivor, an advocate, a voice for the voiceless. She opened a refuge for lost girls in the same town that once turned a blind eye. And Elijah? He stayed close, never far from the door, always watching the shadows. They never said the word heroes. But they didn't need to, because from the moment Clara escaped the forest and Elijah reached out his hand, a different story began, one not of captivity, but of courage, and the frontier would never forget them.